are. And this is accomplished through very intricate editing techniques. For example, at one point, poor Solo is killed off for the 100th time after he's eating sushi. And the screen fills with kind of his blood, and this red overtakes the whole screen. And then there's almost a seamless transition to this bowl of soup that Jimmy is eating, Jimmy and Joystick are eating, that is the exact same color and consistency of the blood. So these two worlds are kind of visually matched, and we as a spectator are constantly trying to understand where we are and at what point we are in this game. So another, way to think about this film is it definitely prefigures the smash hit The Matrix that came out 2 years later. The real world in this film and in The Matrix can be thought of to be as artificial as the cyber world that, for example, in Nirvana, the computer game inhabits. And every time we think we understand which world might be more real than the other, our beliefs are constantly undercut. Both of these films constantly question reality, and they kind of oppose or intermingle several worlds. In this case, the case of Nirvana, the overpopulated metropolis called the Northern Agglomerate is contrasted both with the virtual reality of Nirvana, Solo's game, and the various kind of seedy quarters that the trio traverse in order to, on their kind of ultimate goal of destroying the data bank of the game Nirvana, and therefore liberating poor Solo, who is kind of in this Dantesque cycle of birth and renewal, only to be killed off again. Also, like those who inhabit the Matrix, and we think of Neo throughout all of the films, Jimmy is constantly surveyed. Every action, all of his actions, all of his decisions, everything he does, there's constantly like a big brother presence that is always watching him, which of course recalls George Orwell's 1984, which was adapted in the same year into for the screen, and then also kind of recalls Fritz Lang's The Metropolis from 1927. So this idea of illusion and reality is key to this. Is key to films such as The Matrix, such as Metropolis, and of course in Nirvana. And there's also this sense of once we wake up, once we realize that the world in which we're living is not what we thought it was, it's impossible for us to go back to sleep. And this is exactly Solo's predicament. And it poses this question that kind of makes us rethink our own world. Is the world in which we're living a complete simulation? And what Salvatores really wants is for us to wake up as well, for us to kind of look around and take and assess our lives, to realize that the world in which we live is fairly oppressive and is dominated by kind of machines, and we are becoming more and more alienated with advanced technologies that kind of stand in for interpersonal communication. And the theme of kind of love, communication, friendship is definitely something that runs throughout the film, both in Jimmy's kind of obsession with his girlfriend Lisa, and in the bonding that takes place between not only the three as they go to try to destroy the data bank, but also the friendship that develops between Jimmy and Solo throughout the film. And it's quite touching at the very end when Jimmy actually has to cancel out the game and therefore effectively kill off his very close friend. So this brings us, the question of illusion and reality brings us back to the Buddhist, the kind of the Buddhist subcurrent running throughout the film. So Nirvana, of course, is the state of both being free from suffering and being finally free from the cycle of rebirth, death and rebirth, that is key to reincarnation. So in the Buddhist context, nirvana is synonymous with peace, with liberation from all of those kind of desires, torments, obsessions, and especially reliance upon material things that kind of define our lives. So in nirvana, happiness is enduring, and it comes from enlightenment and not from conditioned things, or those things that are, will always pass away. Entering nirvana, however, is not easy, as it entails kind of a radical reconfiguring of senses and a radical kind of rethinking of the world as we know it. So in Buddhism, reality itself is an illusion. It's a state that must be passed through in order to reach perfection. And here we have our tie, one of our many ties to the film. Those of us who play video games have to kind of master one level of the game before we can move on to the next. And we have to kind of learn from our previous mistakes in order to overcome them and advance one more level. So we are all, in a sense, like Solo, who must relive his suffering and pain until he is liberated with the destruction of the software. So in video games...
Take your time.
So when Solo essentially realizes that his life is only a copy of reality, he kind of understands that his only way out is to be destroyed. And this is, in essence, his paradox. He can only be freed if he can be canceled out. And so nirvana for him is a state of complete non-existence. So Salvatores is really interested in questioning the opposition between virtual reality and some sort of kind of religious, spiritual belief in like transcendence in order to attain a state of perfection, which of course is impossible in a virtual world. Once we turn off the lights, they're off for good. And so here we have, Solo, and we think of the name Solo, solitude, loneliness. He is unhappy precisely because he's unable to forget that he is part of an illusion. And this awareness kind of sharpens his need for liberation. Something else that runs throughout the film, and actually all of Salvatore's films in general, is this desire for change and renewal. And the moral of the film, according to Salvatore in an interview, is this. He says, if you realize that you're a part of a game that you no longer enjoy playing, you want no longer to be part of, it is your duty, kind of your ethical duty, to stop playing, even if it requires a great sacrifice. And he explains that the sacrifice could be a complete reordering of how you thought about yourself, your belief system, your sense of place, your sense of who you are. But it's something that you have to do, because change at all costs, he says, is kind of the key element to all of my films. So the concept of change that runs throughout the film is actually a call to the viewer. It's a call to the viewer to wake up, to kind of take stock of what for Jimmy was kind of a drug-induced, mundane, repetitive, boring existence that was completely overrun by machines, by obligation to work and to duty. And instead what Salvatores is doing with his film, it's really a call to the viewer, a call for the viewer to live life and not just sit passively by and let it happen to them.